Hey everybody, welcome back to our weekly podcast. My name is Patrick Tan, General Counsel for ChainArgos. With me, as usual, every week, our CEO, Chief Data Scientist, Jonathan Reiter. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all the likes, comments, and subscribes, and we appreciate you guys watching the show. So this week, what are we going to talk about? John got phished. John got caught up in a phishing scam.
There you go.
So he's going to share a little bit more information about that. We're going to talk about Falcon Finance. I don't think you may or may not have heard about it, but yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about that one. OKX breaking its router. So OKX runs a DEX aggregator service, and they basically call Ragnarok on their aggregator.
They shut down their aggregator. That's a Thorchain reference for the
people who are fans of the podcast.
Yeah, the fans, yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that and the implications, legal or otherwise, that will have. But let's just go straight into John. John, how do you feel about that? You got phished.
Yeah, so this was pretty entertaining. So I got, I guess I should say before we begin the narrative, this was identified as a phishing scam from the very beginning because it was pretty ham-handed. So I did all of this on purpose, all the way through to the end, taking the calls with people to learn a bit about how this works. So I got some Twitter message from a person pretending to be a Bloomberg editor, and it was a verified account, so I assumed that it was a takeover, rename situation. I did not, in fact, know that specific editor, but I, asked somebody at Bloomberg who immediately confirmed several details of the rest of the interaction were, as expected, not real. Fine. So this person, I think this is known sort of on Twitter as the Bloomberg interview scam. So okay, great. Well, let's get phished. Let's do this. So that led to a suspicious Calendly to book an appointment for the interview with these people. So I can see how somebody who got a message from a Bloomberg editor with no media experience would think, oh, I'd like to speak to this person. I have no, I can see that part of the phishing working. They send you a Calendly link to book a time. I guess companies do that.
Maybe.
A little bit.
Possibly.
And then the thing that immediately, not that I didn't already know this was a phishing scam, but that immediately tipped that off is that the response email, that the Calendly whatever invite comes from was like bloombergmeets@gmail.com. So already at this point, forget that it's a phishing scam. You should be able to tell it's a phishing scam, right? So I wouldn't assume that. I mean, a large company sending you a Calendly thing is reasonable. That's definitely a thing that happens. Right? I happen to know that Bloomberg doesn't use Calendly, but whatever.
Yeah.
But already that's pretty suspicious. And then this person said somebody else would contact me on Telegram. Fine. So I had a conversation on Telegram. That account similarly looked like a different journalist, again, who I didn't know but was able to confirm was not the person. You can create account names and whatever on Telegram fairly easily. And that communication was okay-ish. They were not particularly forthcoming with the expected interview conversation, but whatever. So I was able to arrange a time to see the people and Zoom. So, and this is the part that I think most people probably shouldn't volunteer for, but it's not actually that hard to do reasonably safely. So I just used one of the many whatever laptops for security stuff I have. It's got no secret information on it. All right. So I set up fresh software on the laptop, Zoom, and then because I wanted to get phished, I set up a completely fresh wallet, MetaMask, with a token amount of money in it derived from untraceable whatever sources, straight out of mining. This is old Ethereum mining, bits left over for exactly, I'll say security and other type of operations, small amounts. Join the Zoom. I put my seed phrase in a text file in my home directory, and the MetaMask that I installed had as its password123. I would also note, just for reference, that the burner Gmail account I set up would not let me use password123, and MetaMask would. So MetaMask should probably require stronger passwords. I mean, people get angry when it rejects your attempted password, but that's supposed to be secure. It didn't even warn me. It just here, have a good time. Use password123. So fine. I was trying to get hacked. Fine. So the call was somewhat entertaining. A group of, I think it was 5 pretending to be journalists joined, all with their screens off. One of them was a journalist who I know. So I made the mistake of saying, oh, hi. And that person never spoke again, presumably because it was not that guy. Confirmed it was not that guy. And that went on for a while. I don't know. I wanted to give them as much time as possible to try to hack me to see how this would work. I was just running a fresh Chrome. It was not on Windows. It was on Linux, but a totally standard Chrome, nothing weird. Zoom. the audio's bad, I'll install whatever you want. That's fine. Install everything. Those parts, I'm not recommending people who don't know what they're doing try and sign up, participate in these things. But if you have a spare laptop and install fresh stuff on it, right, and run it on a separate Wi-Fi network, I can do this from a separate network in the office, but just go to a Starbucks, right? I mean, I can't see that actually causing you any real trouble if you don't use the laptop for anything else. Right? If there's no information on the laptop to lose, right? Fair enough. There you go. And don't do it on your home network if you don't know what you're doing. Fine. So hung around for a while, and then eventually when I got kind of tired of it, I asked them if they would take the money already because it had been, 20 minutes, and they asserting to me, it's not a scam, whatever. This is like, fine, okay, but I already spoke with the Bloomberg people you were impersonating. It's not you. Hung up immediately, deleted the Telegram chat, and blocked me on Twitter. So there you go. But I think the 0.025 ETH are still hanging out.
Yeah, they didn't steal the money.
Still ETH yet, so I'm waiting for that.
How would they have stolen the money? Just out of curiosity.
Well, so
what do you think they would have done?
I haven't gone through the laptop because I hadn't had time
Yeah,
for whatever stuff was downloaded.
Yeah.
But the expectation is that the malware, it's an add-in in Chrome, so they should be able to run something.
Okay, so
this was Zoom. This wasn't running in Chrome, right? So it's not like one of the Google Meet.
So help me understand what added. Did they say that in order to participate in this call,
go install this other thing to fix the problem, whatever.
Right.
So as long as they can run some code on your computer, you should be able to figure out that. Right? It's not that hard.
Okay, so just so that I understand,
maybe they're not
this,
as sophisticated.
So just that I understand, they say, okay, here's we're going to set up the call. We have the call, and the audio's a bit wonky. Could you please download
that type of a thing? Run this other stuff.
So please download.
I'm trying to be a little bit soft so people don't, do anything they shouldn't. Right? If that makes sense.
Yeah. So, but at least at a high level, what I understand is that during the call, they say, "Hey, we've got some issues. Please download this."
Dude, that kind of thing. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to make it clear so that the people who, if you want to sign up for this, make sure you're doing this on a clean computer. But I want to give ideas to people that are sort of aspiring hackers. I'm being serious. Right?
Yeah. No. Fair enough. This isn't a cookbook.
The goal here is not, right? Yeah, it's not to make it easier for people to learn.
This is not a cooking show. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
So it was an interesting experience. I think my main takeaway from this is that it did not require special knowledge, experience, or an extreme amount of critical thinking skills to figure out that this wasn't okay, even before I joined a Zoom call with a half dozen people with their cameras off. And I think people with even very little experience of the world will realize that if you're some random person, there's no way half a dozen well-known journalists are all there to talk to you at the same time.
Okay,
that's just not a thing.
No, I
Similarly,
I agree.
Bloomberg's use of a Gmail
should
trick
people. There's a couple of
things. Sorry, I neglected one part. The initial communication from the Bloomberg person, this was more instinct than planning. I'd said, that's great, here's my email address, just contact me. And their response was that they don't check email. I think everyone should know that journalists and editors check email.
Yeah, they do.
Anyway, I forgot to give you that part.
Okay, but a couple of things here. So one of the things is that it was sloppy of them to leave that cryptobloomberg@gmail.com, which is the I think
something like
that. So that's a little bit sloppy because my experience has often been that when they send those things out, they'll use some kind of a redirect so that the email address appears as something at bloomberg.net or something.
Or at least get bloomberg.io or whatever.
I've actually seen at bloomberg.net.
Again, we're trying not to help.
We're trying not to help. But then when you hover over the thing, and then you'll see where the real email goes to. So that there are things to do that. And then the other thing that doesn't really make sense to me is that even if you've steal the money, just steal the money.
Well, I mean, it's possible that the exploit didn't work for whatever. I don't know. I was trying. I made it as easy as I could, but I didn't make it easy enough. It may also be. Maybe this is good security advice for lots of people who maybe don't feel so capable of figuring out if stuff is or isn't. Go get a really old, cheap laptop, install Linux, Chrome, Zoom, put no special information on it. You can buy these things. It depends on what country you're in, but $100 you got plenty of choices. Some of this stuff is indestructible. In fact, the one I use there is an X-Education Lenovo Chromebook, a ThinkPad Chromebook. This thing is proper indestructible. It was made for, I think, secondary school kids.
This is not sponsored.
No. Also, you can only buy these used. They stopped making these a decade ago. Yeah. Right?
It's not sponsored.
But you just use that on a public network if you're concerned about things. You have no security risks there because there's no information on the laptop. Okay. It has no...
But
anyway,
to go to your point about how, like, if you're a random person, a Bloomberg reporter, wouldn't want to be speaking with you necessarily.
Well, no, I don't mean one person wouldn't, but you're not going to get.
Five.
I can bring up the. Let
Yeah.
me see. I got a screenshot here of the call.
Yeah.
Over in my notes. 1 second.
So, well, as John brings up that screenshot, one of the things I wanted to tell you is that you don't usually have 5 reporters on a call with you. That's not a thing. That's almost never a thing. Second thing is,
Like that's not. I mean, let's be realistic here.
guy in the center top is the scammer.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, realistically, like this is not a very good attempt at. People should know that's unlikely to happen. You're not that important.
Yep. So, the other thing is that I think as these things start to get a little bit more sophisticated, and because especially people who are involved in crypto and are quite public about it, some of them, not all of them, some of them may be publicity hungry, and the idea that a Bloomberg reporter wants to speak to you oftentimes, or any kind of reporter wants to speak to you anytime, can be an attractive lure to get you to come on, and like, oh yeah,
Well, this is
like,
the classic. If it looks good to be true, it probably is, right? This is basic life skills.
So just be careful about that. If reporters do approach you, they will use their official emails. They don't usually switch off their cameras when they speak to you. I mean, on the occasion that we've had reporters speak to us when they've switched off their cameras, it's because we've already had many calls with them, and it's a weird time zone.
That's fair.
It's a weird time zone, but never on the initial call. Most oftentimes, where possible, we actually meet journalists in person. If they happen to be in the city that we're at that point in time. So just a little bit of a public service.
And do take basic actions to protect yourself if you want to do slightly higher risk activities.
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
this.
If you want to roll the dice,
If you live in any city, it's not that hard to go get old cheap laptops and do basic stuff like that. And just don't put any of your personal information on there. Don't give it the password for your home Wi-Fi, whatever, and you're good, right? I mean, don't go too risky. I don't want people getting in any, causing any real trouble here. But there are things where you can physically disable the Wi-Fi. You only have to remove the card. But anyway.
So Falcon Finance, yes. I want to stress that this has nothing to do with Falcon X. And one of the first things that when John asked me to look at this thing, one of the first things I said, this feels instinctively like that whole Nigerian email scam type thing. I'm not saying that this is what this is, but oftentimes, when you use names which are very, very similar, and it makes people start to think, oh, okay, they're probably associated with the guys from Falcon X or yada, 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 because Falcon Finance looks like it could be a potential extension of Falcon X. But I want to make it very, very clear that the project that we're about to do a little bit
or
of a
Falcon,
deep dive,
lots of other Falcon stuff.
Well, correct. Yeah. So because it's such a common name, you should really check first. But first of all, I can just tell you to save you the trouble, Falcon Finance has nothing to do with Falcon X. So, but that was the first impression that I got. That was what was. So tell us a little bit. What's Falcon Finance?
Come to some data in a second. So this is another of the now burgeoning field of these sort of paired stable coins. So there's a USDF, Falcon Finance stablecoin, and then there's an SUSDF. It's a staked Falcon Finance stablecoin, and the idea is that stablecoin pays interest in its staking form. This seems to be a theme come across a lot, and the documentation explains that this is backed by whatever, a whole bunch of assets, and there's yield, and you can collect the yield by staking the token. In a somewhat amusing turn of events, you can also stake the staked token. So there's a SUSDF and an SUSDF staking program, whatever. So again, per the documentation, what's supposed to happen here is that there's yield generated from some trading activities that are transparent. And the thing that originally made me look closely enough, we're talking about it. So we're going to go through how the system works. As expected, the main use of the non-interest-bearing token is to stake for the interest-bearing token. And as you noted, the documentation even has a step where you can just skip the whole mint the non-interest-bearing stake, and you can just have it automatically generate the interest-bearing token for you. This is reminiscent of looped leverage in the pre-Luna era a lot, where lots of services would give you automated maxima leverage. There's a similarity here that should be pretty obvious. Okay, and then I guess we'll come to the punchline when we get to the punchline. I'll try not to press the wrong buttons this time. So this is main activity on USDF, and this is just sort of a cursory look, but the top usage here, the biggest receiver of it is the staking, and we'll come to what the bundler is in a second, but the bundler is a thing that feeds the staking, right? So you can generate USDF, and you end up staking it to generate SUSDF. We've seen this pattern many times. USD0, USD0++, other things like that. And if you look at SUSDF, so this is SUSDF token, its biggest use, again, stuff going through the bundler, and then a staking program for the staked token. So there's some NFT-linked double staking thing that you can do here. Doesn't really matter. So this is the staking address balance of staked USDF, and it looks kind of like you'd expect, right? It's just up and to the right. There's not a lot of withdrawals, and we're up to, what, 50 million or so of this thing that's been staked at this point. And the staking address, that's a fair amount of money, right? And then this is, okay, so this is the bundler. We saw this one earlier. This is the second biggest. This thing receives smaller amounts of flow and feeds them along into the staking process. So that you can see here, before there was a gray line running up and to the left, up and to the right with the balance, right? So here there's no accumulating balance. It's just inflow, outflow. The different bars correspond to different measures of inflows and outflows. No matter. So this is just a way of bundling deposits for whatever reason. And then this is the balance of the staked. So these are doubly staked tokens. These USDF have been staked. USDF were generated, and they were staked again in some NFT thing that there's no point.
The staking's so nice you did it twice?
Something like that. Yeah, so there's a loop. And again, you can see here not much, and then this thing launched fairly recently, and it's up to about half the balance of the staked USDF have been restaked in the SUSDF staking program. That's fine. I think this is the SUSDF staking thing, and you can just see all the money comes in from the bundler and whatever goes out to whatever's happening here with trading. So this is where the tokens go. Fine. Now, what's most interesting here is that on the front page, protocol, the website, description, documentation, they all talk about how it's super transparent, the rest of it, okay? So the way the system works is that interest is paid into the staking contract by having fresh tokens minted, right? And they're minted by the operator of the system. Fine. This is the way all of these things work. And that interest is supposed to correspond to the gains from some kind of trading activities that are transparent. But none of the assets are disclosed or discussed anywhere. Okay. That's kind of normal, right? On exchange activity, whatever. But these guys went, and it is a guy that runs it, who I've tried to contact several times, by the way. We should note this for 1 second. I emailed the contact on the website. It bounced. And then I've direct messaged this guy in a couple different ways and gotten no
maybe
response.
he gets a lot of messages. Anyway. He'll get
no, that's certainly possible. And they actually have an arrangement with Fireblocks so that the assets are held off-chain in one of these Fireblocks off-exchange. So there should just be addresses with the assets. So it should be trivial to provide the information. This thing's been live for a month and a half or something. And the information's not there. So if there are assets that are being traded that are generating the interest, okay. If the tokens are just being minted to pay the interest, that's a literal Ponzi scheme.
Well, transparency delayed is not transparency denied.
Yeah, I mean, it at the moment, if you sort of treat the lack of disclosure as there are no other assets here, it's a straight up Ponzi scheme.
That would be concerning.
If there's other assets, it's just a transparency problem, but they've made all of the effort so that it's trivial to provide that transparency. There should be these on-chain addresses providing me with the address that's in the Fireblocks, whatever, that I can just see and look at the assets. That should be straightforward. Your trading activities should be transparent.
I absolutely agree with this one.
They claim that they're audited and the rest of it, and there's just no links.
Well, I mean, the smart contract is one of the things here is that this is I think it's important to mention that Falcon Finance is a little bit different from your typical RWA type vehicle, where if you can't see the assets, that makes sense because those assets probably sit in a brokerage account
or something.
Correct. They sit in a brokerage account and stuff like that. Short of them actually producing those statements of those assets. There's just no way for you to draw that link.
I mean, you end up with these these chain link oracles that end up being trusted. Those are the solutions.
Yeah.
Here, it should just all be there.
Because it's on-chain assets, and at least you as a project claim that you're, trading crypto assets. It makes sense that you should. I mean, the whole, spiel and the whole selling point is transparency. It's interesting that. Transparency for me, but not for thee, kind of thing.
I mean, it's transparent in that I can see where the tokens are sitting, and I can tell you that they weren't sent to an exchange.
Yeah, that's true. All right, let's look at the data.
I mean, that there you go, right? That's it, right? I guess that's the end of that section of the podcast.
All right, moving on. Finally, OKX breaking its router. This has this is what we've been talking about on the show for a long time. And if you've been a fan of the show, you would have known us speaking about this for some time, where we spoke about how a lot of these so-called decentralized or allegedly decentralized projects actually have a lot more control over the things than they would have you believe. And up to this point, it had been in some cases less theoretical, in some cases actually just theoretical, because whilst they had the admin keys and the ability to like call Ragnarok on their project and brick it, nobody had actually done that.
Well, yes, I think the two highest profile projects that have demonstrated that sort of denied central control have identifiable people and then went ahead and just did it in the relatively recent past.
Yeah.
This is a big thing a long time ago, but Thorchain and Linnea, right? So
Yeah,
Consensus
those are the only
button.
two. Yeah, that's right.
And those are like really properly identifiable that have just said this is decentralized and then just said, oh, there's a problem. Pause.
And then we'll pause the thing. But this is completely different.
Years ago, this was very common. So don't act like
Yeah.
don't send us descriptions of things that you're still angry about from 5 years ago.
Because there was stuff where they go like, oh, we need decentralized control to fix the bug, yada yada yada. We'll decentralize eventually, fine, whatever. Then there was a whole period of silence, and then there was a new fresh thing that said we're decentralized from day one. But oh yeah, we do have these admin keys, but don't worry, we'll never use them.
Yeah.
And then they kind of used it. There's Linnea, the most famous one, where they paused the thing. But that's the thing. Pausing is not Ragnarok. So
Yeah, and I guess while we're
Yeah.
on that subject, we can even make a distinction. The various Solana incidents where they all had to change their software, at least that was a large number of people coming together to do something.
Yeah.
So, like if all the Ethereum
Nodes,
node operators get on a
Yeah.
chat and decide to take the network down, the network will go down, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, of
that's
course,
just the
of
way it
course.
works.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole point of a consensus mechanism. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
if we as a democracy would like to dismantle that democracy, that's our choice.
It's interesting. I wonder, given the way Bitcoin operates, this is off topic at this point, but you could probably get people representing a large enough fraction of mining power that while the network didn't go offline, the difficulty adjustment was so far away that the block times would explode
Yeah.
and it would become effectively useless.
I mean, this is what decentralization and democracy. Those are one. That's not. Well, I mean, depending on your perspective, that's either a bug or a feature.
Okay, anyway, we'll get back to...
But to get back to this, I guess the distinction I want to make before John jumps into this is to just for you to understand that there is, I think you may not necessarily appreciate it, but it is a point worth noting that there is a difference between a pause and like a 0-day kind of like apocalypse now type situation. And now on that note,
So
that's what this is.
OKX announced that they would be shutting down their DEX router, aggregation router. So you can think of this conceptually as something like MetaMask swap function, 1 inch, 0x. There's a number of DEX router. Uniswap has it. There's DEX routers out there. Right? It's a DEX router. Fine. So actually, we can look for 1 second here, and coincident with that, you can see the remove proxy transactions that froze it. We're not going to go through the technical details of how the freeze worked on the podcast, but effectively, these calls made it so that the proxy would no longer do stuff. So that the DEX would no longer do stuff. This is not the contract you interact with directly, whatever, and then the time at which these came out is coincident with the posting. So, fine. That's not sort of just inferring it. If you actually work through how the code functions, removing all of the proxies from that prevents some approval thing from allowing tokens to flow through. So that's definitely the thing that broke the system. So they were able to do this because they had some admin keys for various contracts in the system, and they could just call the update functions. Right? So they're able to shut down the system. And similarly, as should be obvious if they can remove all the necessary components to brick the system, they could simply change those components to new ones that went through whatever compliance procedures somebody decided they wanted. Right. So with respect to this DEX router, OKX always has had the ability to comply with any kind of a court order or regulation or anything like that, because it's not an immutable decentralized system. Right. And the absolute proof of that is that they just decided to turn it off and use their admin keys to turn it off. Okay. So anything it's done that somebody has a problem with, OKX, I guess, should be accountable for, because that's the way these things operate. Right? They can decide that their policy is not to, whatever, screen transactions. Doesn't really make much difference. Okay, so that's interesting. So the exact technical mechanisms, again, we're not going to go to that level of detail, but something about routing tables and maintaining which transactions get sent where under which conditions. Right? People are familiar with proxy contracts, and then we've talked a lot about how there's many of these, the way routers work is there's a big table, and you tell it, I want to do this, and it looks up where you go to do that, and then it sends it to the correct address. And if you empty the table, the system doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Or if everything redirects to contracts, just spew errors, refuse to transact, whatever, then you effectively brick the system. Right? So your ability to brick the system that you can brick the system doesn't mean you can do anything with it, but the way the system was bricked tells you that in this case you can do anything with it. The admin can do anything with it. This is not a situation where those admin keys were held collectively by a DAO or a voting construct or something like that. They're just an EOA. Right? In most of the other cases we've talked about or we'll talk about now, they're either held by an EOA or a multi-sig with a small number of signers. So, if it's one person or three people, it doesn't really matter. It's, that small collective is collectively responsible for what's going on. So what I find most interesting here is that this is precisely the mechanism that MetaMask uses that we've published about, and it comes back to some legal responses that we've, I think, responded to before. So in the case of MetaMask and effectively every other smart wallet that's out there, there's something like a routing table controlled by some admin keys, and the person that runs those admin keys can effectively brick the device by wiping out the routing table. The specific case of MetaMask, they can't delete all the routing entries. They have to have at least one, but they can stick in a broken one, right? Fine. So that product, okay. There was a response to something we wrote a few months ago from a lawyer who'd worked on the Coinbase wallet case.
Yeah.
Well, he was at Cravath and now is at an investment firm called Variant, saying that assuming the adapters, the things doing this sort of routing function, aren't malicious, then everything is great and compliant. So this is a classic legal tool of assuming the problem doesn't exist, therefore the problem doesn't exist. So what I would like to say here is that from the perspective of the North Koreans, who the OKX was trying to prevent using the system, OKX was being malicious. Right? I'm not defending North Korea. I'm saying that you can choose who you're malicious against means you have control over the system. Right? And then the legal authorities that supervise you, they're the ones that tell you who you have to be malicious against. That's compliance. Right? So if you have the ability to choose who you're malicious against, you're in control of the system. And your failure to do that in line with the dictates of the regulator, that says you're non-compliant. Right? So this makes it extremely clear. Right? I'm not saying that North Korea should be allowed to use a system because I love North Korea. Right? That's not the point here.
Really?
The point here
you
is...
got Rich Son of West.
Yeah,
I think you pretty much love
okay,
North Korea.
Well, actually, their software is interesting. If not, anyway, that's a separate conversation. But you don't get to make these decisions yourself, even if that decision's in line with the law. That you can make that decision shows that you have that discretion and control, which means that other parties that are sanctioned or are not supposed to transact or KYC or screening that's required should be done. Yeah, you don't get to decide you're only going to be malicious against this guy.
Yeah.
That has to be within some context. So it's interesting to watch. This incident has forced people out into the open and to admit degrees of control they did not sort of formerly want to acknowledge that they had.
And that's kind of the point. Like, it's a bit like saying, you.
Sorry, so just for the record, we're perfectly happy that they blocked North Korea from using the
yeah,
system.
yeah.
We just think that they need to follow court orders around blocking people in general, and all the parties that have this control need to do that within the normal legal procedures. They're not just on their own making these decisions unsupervised. That's crazy.
It's kind of like, because you don't, a lot of people don't fully understand how software works, so therefore they think, oh, maybe you don't have an owner, fine, but then you have all these admin keys that can actually affect what the software actually does. You have effective control. So people think, oh, okay, no owner, or owner's been
or it's immutable. The code's immutable.
The code's immutable. It can't be changed. Okay, but the admin key allows you to redirect something. It's a bit like, I don't have control of the plane, but I do have control of the engines, the oxygen, and everything else.
Actually, that's a good example. You can't re-engineer the airplane. The code is immutable, but the data is mutable. And as long as the code operates on the data, you may well be able to change the way it behaves.
And that is why there's a trusted third party in the cockpit.
Well, okay. Here there isn't always, but in the cases that we're talking about now, and this applies to well, to MetaMask, the Coinbase wallet, to a variety of other services, just in the same way that it does to OKX. In fact, almost precisely the same way. The code is very similar in function. The names are different, but the names have been changed, but the functionalities are the same. So I suspect that this will have eventually some legal implications for a lot of these people because technically they're identical, and claims have been asserted in court filings even by a number of parties related to the smart wallet type functions that, once you make the connection to this theoretical thing that could be done to having been done in practice by somebody for stated reasons, identical technical means, those misstatements to the court may turn out to be a problem.
So on that note, thanks for tuning in. Today's been a long episode. Hope you had fun. We did, definitely. That's why we do the show. So we will see you again next week. Bye-bye.